Okay, let's talk a little bit about Paul Revere's Midnight Ride, because there are some stuff you may not know, and there is a certain famous person who wrote a poem that leaves some people in the events out. And I'm not taking anything away from Paul Revere. He was a silversmith, he was a metal worker, and he was a patriot, and believe it or not, he was a dentist too. In fact, it's, well, what you would call a dentist back in that time period. He was also, like I said, an ardent patriot. He took part in the Boston Tea Party. He was a member of the Sons of Liberty. So did Paul Revere ride out on a late night ride? He did on April 18th, 1775. Probably spilled over to the 19th, but it did not all happen on the 19th. Though the events of the 18th set the stage for Lexington and Concord. Dr. Joseph Warren, who deserves his own podcast, he'll get his own podcast or his own video, asked Revere to ride out and warn John Hancock, yeah, that one with the signature, and Samuel Adams, yep, that one, if and when the British were coming, except that he most likely did not say the British were coming. The Declaration of Independence had not been signed at this time, and the battles of Lexington and Concord obviously hadn't happened just yet. Revere was still British. Hancock was still British. Adams was still British. Warren was still British. He would have said something more along the lines of the regulars are coming out. You know, the regular army soldiers were coming out. But Warren got faulty information regarding the arrest of Hancock and Adams, but the regulars were indeed coming, and they would come through Lexington and Concord. Revere did get rowed across to Charlestown, and upon reaching the opposite shore and being informed that a signal had indeed been sent or given from the Old North Church, Revere sets off on his midnight ride and warned Hancock and Adams. But there was another rider who would also warn those two men. This was William Dawes, and Dawes took a longer route up the peninsula to get to Lexington. And upon arriving, he delivered the same message. Dawes was a tanner by trade and was known for wearing a disguise or acting drunk to slip past British lines. He had also been instrumental during the winter of 1775 in getting cannon from Boston to Concord. Revere alerted the towns he came to on his way, or villages on his way to Lexington. Dawes did not stop until he got to Hancock and Adams. He felt that it was more important to get to them and then on to Concord, and he also was not as well connected with the villages that he was passing through. Revere and Dawes also refreshed themselves a bit. Undoubtedly, they were thirsty. They were hungry from the ride they've already been on before they left Lexington. Revere and Dawes would set out again, but come across another Sons of Liberty member, Samuel Prescott or Prescott. Prescott, I have read, was making a return from his fiance's house late at night. Prescott, a doctor, joined the ride, allegedly telling Revere and Dawes that the villages on the way to Concord may take the warning more seriously if he were with them, since he was known in the area. As the trio approached Lincoln, which was another village on the way to Concord, they were stopped by a patrol of British soldiers. Revere was held in custody. Dawes would spur his horse, and he would eventually lose the soldiers and somehow lose his own horse in his escape. But he did escape. Prescott would be the only rider of the three to make it to Concord. He was able to do so by jumping his horse over a stone wall as he fled the British patrol. Revere was questioned and he was released, but his mount was given to a British sergeant on that patrol. So we know a bit more now, in case you didn't, about what really happened on that ride. But there was another famous ride, almost all but lost to history. It was by a 16-year-old girl named Sybil Ludington, I hope that's right, or it's Ludington, who would make a midnight ride 2 years later on April 26, 1777. On that night, word spread that the British planned to attack Danbury, Connecticut, where provisions for the Continental Army were housed. Sybil mounted her horse, warning of the incoming attack, riding twice to two or three times as far as Revere. The raid by the British this time was successful, but thanks to Sybil, the British were pushed back to Long Island Sound after that raid occurred. The young heroine, riding alone through the dark and the rain, was later, as legend tells us, thanked by General George Washington himself for her brave act. The story of Sybil is not without its detractors, the authenticity being questioned since the middle of the 20th century. And that's because the first reference that we had to her appeared in a book from 1880. Sybil was a real person. Her father, Henry, was a colonel in the militia. Sybil would marry and have a child named for her father, Henry. And when she passed at the age of 77, you want to guess which cemetery she was buried in? The same one as her father, Henry. And we know a lot about her father because, here's why. To question a story from history is the job of historians to see about its accuracy. But in this case, I need to ask, what would be the end goal to make a passing mention of her in a book that mentioned, guess who, her father, Henry Moore? Historians have uncovered documents more recently, and they were letters, though not contemporary to Sybil's time, where her family members discussed her midnight ride. I like to believe that Sybil made her ride and was instrumental in the British being pushed back to Long Island Sound. But in closing, why do we know Paul Revere has so many more inaccuracies about the midnight ride? Well, think Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. He penned the poem when the nation was on the verge of fracturing just before the start of the Civil War. And he took a bit of poetic license. He was a pacifist. Longfellow hoped that remembering that ride from 1775 would be a type of soothing balm to a nation ready to tear itself apart.